to members of the public up there as well. Just get through the housekeeping first. There is no plan to have our fire alarm tests tonight, so should we hear a ringing bell, a loudly ringing bell, we should leave the building by the green marked exits, that one there, and this one to my right, and let's gather underneath the canopy outside Waitrose, or maybe inside if we can grab a coffee there. Can we also please be sure to have our mobile phones switched either off or to silent? And members, can we be sure that our cards are plugged in? We are being webcast. Ladies and gentlemen up there, this is a meeting held in public. It is not a public meeting. We do have one or two public speakers. They've already been nominated. But you may hear things in the debate here in this chamber that you either disagree with or you support. Could I ask you please refrain from either indicating your support with applause, although I'm sure the members would appreciate it, and certainly please do not jeer if you disagree with them. Thank you very much. Let's move on then, members. Item 1 are the minutes of our last meeting on the 18th of May. They've been on the table. Is it your wish that I sign them as a correct record? Thank you very much. Apologies for absence, please, Gary.
Yes, Chairman. So we've received apologies for absence from Councillor David Else, Councillor Kevin Denis and Councillor Mary Forzeski, and I believe Councillor Gray is delayed. I can't see him here at the moment, but he may well arrive shortly.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Stuart Stennett and Councillor Jeanette Stennett have declared non-pecuniary interest in all of the applications on the agenda tonight, as they know the families involved.
Any other late declarations, ladies and gentlemen? No? Moving on then. Questions by members of the public? Gary?
None received, Chairman.
Okay. And finally, item 5, any relevant updates to government guidance or legislation since our last meeting? Elizabeth?
Thank you, Chairman. None this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We move on then to applications for planning permission. Members, please note that in the event of any site inspections arising from this evening's meeting, these will be held on Monday the 11th of July at a time to be agreed at the meeting. Item 6.2. Item A1W 2016/0599, the construction of a new vehicular access and closure of existing access as amended by plan received on the 24th of May at Northcote Farm, Northcote Lane, Shamley Green. Members, please welcome Zyra Knight.
Thank you. The application site is located southwest paddock of Northcote Farm or Northcote Lane. The surrounding area is characterised as working farmland with existing mature hedging and formed access track for agricultural vehicles. There are 2 residential properties located to the east and southeast of the site. Northcote Lane is a narrow country lane with high banks and mature hedging and trees lining the lane. The planning application would be for a new access track into Northcote Lane, approximately 80 metres in length and connecting with the existing internal access track within Northcote Farm. The proposal would also include the closure of the existing access track to Northcote Lane and the reinstatement of the bank and plantings of native hedging, and the proposed track would be constructed of compacted hardcore. The scale of the proposed access would be of a size that would accommodate agricultural vehicle access and enable appropriate site distances for Northcote Lane. The applicant has proposed to install approximately 200 metres of mixed native wildlife hedging along the southwest boundary of the paddock to reduce any visual impacts as a result of the proposed access. This is a photo on Northcote Lane looking east toward the existing access, which will be closed. The car is located on the existing access. This photo is the view looking northeast towards the proposed access track. The gap created by the fallen hedge depicts the proposed access location. This view is looking west towards the proposed access track, and the card depicts the driveway which services Northcote Hill property. The picture on the right is the view of the field looking southeast where the proposed track would be located. On the left is the view of the field looking east towards Hillside Cottage from the existing access that will be closed off. Paragraph 90 of the MPPF states out that certain forms of development are not inappropriate in Greenbelt, provided they preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and do not conflict with the purpose, including land in Greenbelt. These forms of development include engineering operations, for which the new access track is considered to be. The impact on the openness of the Greenbelt remains a judgment for which officers are satisfied that the proposal remains compliant. The subject site is also within the AOMB and AGLV land. However, the amended alignment of the proposed track and appropriate native hedging planting is considered to reduce the potential impacts on the visual amenity of the area. The proposed road access would require agricultural vehicles to use Northcote Farm to travel approximately 70 metres further along Northcote Lane to the east. Any residential impacts associated with the relocation of the access track would be considered temporary and periodic for the time which those vehicles would be utilising the proposed access to gain access to Northcote Farm. The proposal to relocate access would not likely result in additional traffic, and officers are therefore satisfied that there would be no material harm caused to residential amenity. I bring your attention to update sheet. The representation period for the amended plans ended on the 7th of June 2016. 2 additional objections were received in relation to the amended plans, and both objectors wanted to reaffirm their original objections to the application. No changes to the recommendations, to the recommended conditions and informatives were necessary. Therefore, the revised recommendation reads that, subject to conditions 1 to 2, informatives 1 to 5, permission be granted for this application.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We have 2 public speakers this evening. The first, I believe, is Mr. Howitt. The floor is yours, Mr. Howitt.
Okay.
For 4 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Explained. You have the green light for 3.5 minutes, a yellow one for another 30 seconds, and when you get onto the red light, I will, if you're still talking, I will ask you.
Jenny Squires and myself, Chairman, are splitting it, so I'll talk for about 3 minutes and she'll rush up and do the final minute. Tell me when I'm ready to go.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman, Councillors. I'm going to make 3 main points as an objection to this planning application. Firstly, there actually is no need, in fact, to change the existing access. Mr. Tilley currently has 2 vehicle accesses to his farm. He argues that because he only has access rights over a strip of land, that this may be blocked by a car or by a fallen tree. We've lived there 13 years and we've never seen his access blocked. Importantly, in the documents, the owner of the strip of land has refuted Mr. Tilley's reasons. and Mr. Tilley has never complained in the past of any access difficulties. The factors that Mr. Tilley complains about actually will still exist with the new access, a potential fallen tree or a car. His argument therefore lacks justification. This application also is not wholly compliant with RD10, as it is not reasonably necessary for the existing agricultural use. The second point I'd make, safety and AONB access impact. Northcote Lane is a single lane road. Mr. Tilley is an active agricultural contractor. The traffic will now come up Northcote Lane 200 metres closer to two dwellings. This is 3 times greater than in the plan, so the plans are incorrect. Natural hedgerows and banks are going to be removed to improve the sight lines. We believe that the destruction will be much greater than set out in the plan. At the new access, vehicles will need to stop as he opens field gates, causing traffic congestion and increasing risk of an accident. And Northcote Lane is 3 times wider and is safer at his existing access. The plans do not show this. I would urge you to look very closely at the plans in more detail and consider the extent of the destructive impact and how a wide 40-foot tractor or trailer, which is what he used, will turn into his field from a 3-metre wide 90-degree turning point. I believe the actual impact will be much greater than planned. All aspects of safety and sight lines are better at the existing access. The third and final point, the impact on the residential amenity. The proposed access is directly opposite the entrance to our house, Northcote Hill. The impact on us is permanent and substantial, and not temporary, as mentioned in the report. Mr. Tilley is an active agricultural contractor, and he uses the vehicles all day long. It has a huge impact on us, whereas we are not impacted at all by his current access. If his business expands, traffic levels will also increase. Furthermore, the existing plan understates the scale he will need, understates the scale, as he will need to use our driveway as a turning point for his large vehicles. I actually will need to put up bollards to curtail trespassing. I believe the 12 planning principles of the local plan are being compromised. Why should Mr. Tilley's plans be allowed to create such a negative impact on my property? I think it's unjust. We recommend that the application is refused.
Jenny Squire, Hillside Cottage. We live adjacent to and overlook the new proposed access. We maintain the new access is not necessary as the applicant already has 2 working entrances. The suggestion that this access will be an exchange of 1 for 1 is incorrect, as we are not replacing like for like. The current access has no impact on local residents or highway safety. The new access impacts 2 residential properties directly, all local residences via highway safety, and will destroy ancient banks and hedgerow. The amended plans still impact on residential amenity. We have no problems with the current access. However, the new access road will direct exiting traffic directly towards and much closer to Hillside Cottage, resulting in headlight glare to windows and an increase in noise and dust. The additional hedging proposed on the amended plan will not screen the access road from Hillside Cottage. The proposal still adversely affects highway safety. The Highways Department states the new access did not raise any concerns in terms of safety. 8 local residents and the parish council disagree and maintain the new site is a poor location for a new access and prefer the original access. These are local people who know the lane well, many using it daily, and their views should be given more consideration.
Can I ask you now to wind up, please, Mrs. Squire?
This area of outstanding beauty is still at risk. Removal of the original banks and vegetation, which have been centuries in the making, and replaced with low banks and new hedging, will not replicate the landscape removed. I request this application be refused.
Thank you very much. Members?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am the local member because this application site is on my side of the road, and Councillor Band's ward is on the other side of the road. And I therefore called it in. The original application, the route was not curving around the side of the field, but took a direct route right across the field, and that seemed to me to be undesirable. and I did suggest to a very helpful planning officer, whose report is very good, that we perhaps might see if the application could be amended to put it round the side, and I didn't know whether that would be acceptable or not, but at least it would be better. I understand, and I don't know whether the planning officer is aware, but I do understand that Wannish Parish Council now don't object in view of the new route, which is one reason why they're not here today, because their objections were very forthright, if I might put it that way, as set out on page 9. But I now understand that having seen the new plans, that they are not now objecting to it, and I'd welcome a comment on that when I've finished. It does seem to me that, and I've listened carefully to the objections that have been raised today, as well as the objections set out in the report, and dealing with one aspect first. I mean, so far as safety is concerned, the Highway Authority are recommending 2 conditions, but are not objecting to this on highway grounds, and therefore any suggestion that we should refuse this application for highway reasons would not be sustained if the matter went further to appeal. So far as I'm aware, and I would welcome officers' comment, somebody can apply for a new access way without there having to be a need, although I suppose that that is a material consideration if there was the need, so far as the planning guidance is concerned. And it's debatable, I suppose, whether there is a need, because clearly the applicant wouldn't be applying for the expense of changing his access way if there were no problems that exist at the moment. The one comment, so on balance, I feel that the amended application is acceptable, and I would just draw officers' attention, it's been drawn to my attention, on condition 1. It refers to plans dated March 16. I would imagine we should be referring to the plans as submitted on the 24th of May 16. So that it's quite clear that if planning permission is granted, we are looking at the plans as set out on page 7, not anything else. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Officers, like to respond to the point that Mr. Goodrich has made?
In relation to the reference for the date, we've remained consistent with the date that's been referenced on the amended plans. So it had, unfortunately, the draftsman hasn't updated the date on the plans.
Thank you very much. Mr.
So we need to update or amend, do we? I know what plan we're meant to be doing, but do we need to amend condition 1 on page 19 to 1, 2 and 4? It all relates to drawing MR 2614A dated March 16, and my understanding in March 16 I had a different route than the one that is before us today, so I'm just making that point.
Peter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Goodrich. I mean, what we need to put in there, I think, is to be clear, received on the revised date, but the actual plan shows the March date, so we can't amend that. But I think if we put in brackets the date it was received, for the avoidance of doubt, hopefully if members are happy with that, that will clear up that point. But yeah, just for clarification, we'll put that in. Thank you, Chairman.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Goodrich?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Band.
Could I just ask the answer to whether the officers are aware of what the Wantage Parish Council's views are on the amended application?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, sorry for not picking that up when I came back. We haven't received any additional comments in the timescale of the application, so we're not aware of any revised. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Band.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank the officers for a report on quite a difficult topic. Like Councillor Goodrich, in the light of the County Council Highways comments on the highway situation, I think we are left with only a limited amount to object to, and now, as I understand, the track now moves around the edge of the field. I think it's difficult to see there are significant grounds to object to this, and maybe albeit reluctantly, but I too would like to, I'm glad that we're going to actually amplify the definition and the conditions in respect of the actual what plans received. So maybe somewhat reluctantly I will agree with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? Mr. Byam.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I was interested to hear the well-defined objections to this, and of course the officers' photographs, I must admit, it looked much worse condition, or position rather, to have the access, the new access, than the old, and therefore the combination of the photographs being seen and the then hearing the objections from the neighbours, I wish we'd had a site inspection. It doesn't look good to me, and their comments were made which I thought were very good. So overall, I'm not in a view to support this application, but would support the idea of a site visit if that was seen to be worthwhile from other members.
Members, Mr. Byam has proposed a site visit. Does anyone wish to second that? Are you wishing to second that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to second that because I share Councillor Byam's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a proposed and duly second proposal for a site visit. Can I see those members in favour of a site visit?
Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 for a site visit.
And those against?
That's 3 against.
Any abstentions?
2.
Looks like we have a site visit. Okay, going back to the agenda then. Members, please note then that will be on Monday the 11th of July at a time to be agreed. Could I suggest 10 o'clock? Are we happy with 10 o'clock on 11th of July? I personally, and my other half, will not be there because we will be on holiday. So, well done for seconding. However, 11th July, 10 o'clock, site visit, and we will move on to item B2.
Chairman, could I just ask if the officers could make inquiry of the parish council one way or the other as to what their situation is formally concerning this application now?
I expected him to have an application to deal with, but of course he doesn't. So before we allow Joe to dive in, can I introduce members? Tim, you know Tim Bryson. He is going to be the area team leader for Eastern and Central. He will be holding the fort whilst Catherine is away on pregnancy leave. So welcome in that new role, Tim. And perhaps you may get to speak again at Eastern Planning, but not this evening. Moving on then, item A2 WA 2016/0569, the erection of a dwelling following partial demolition of the existing garage at land at the rear of 3 and 5 Kings Road, Cranley. Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to the provision of a new detached 3-bedroom chalet-style bungalow on land to the rear of 3 and 5 Kings Road. The site lies within the developed area of Cranley, where the principle of development may be considered acceptable, subject to the impact on visual and residential amenities. The site is surrounded by existing built form, including chalet-style properties within the cul-de-sac Kingslake to the rear. An existing access drive, which currently serves the garage building, runs between numbers 3 and 5 Kings Road. The proposal would require the partial demolition of this existing garage building, but a small area will be retained to be used as bin and cycle storage, and provision would be made for the parking of 3 cars on an area of hard standing. If I can now take you through some photographs and plans of the site. So this is the application site. I'll say this is Kings Road. This is Kinglake, which is a development of 4 chalet-style properties. The proposal is to put a new dwelling in the position here. You'll see this is the existing building, which is partially demolished. Part of it will be retained on the development side of the application side of the site. That's where the bins and cycle store would be. And this is the access that would be used between number 3 and number 5. Again, there's another layout of the proposed site. So again, you come up through here. The main garden area will be to the rear here, and you'll note the unusual sort of shape of the site to the side. This is a photograph taken from standing on Kings Road, looking down towards the application site between the 2 properties. This is looking sort of standing at the end of the driveway, if you like, sort of looking towards. So this is a corner. I'll go back to the location plan because it's quite a difficult site to describe it. If you remember this fence here, and then this bit is the rear garden. This is number 4. So if I go back to the location plan, that fence that I was pointing out is there. Oops, sorry. Is there. That's the property that I was pointing at. This is the bit of the garden that you're looking down the site of. This is looking again from the end of the driveway, looking towards the existing garage building, which is going to be partially demolished, and there's that same fence again. That's actually the rear elevation of 4 Kingslake. So again, the side boundary comes down here and down towards the rear garden area. So that's the existing property. This is the rear elevation of that property. This is, again, that same fence, the corner of the garage building looking towards number 1 Kingslake. And that's looking from within the site, looking back down towards the Kings Road. And these are the existing properties. So you've got number 5 and number 3. That's number 7. So you've got the existing properties. And the proposal will actually include an area of part of the land to number 5. So you'll see on the location, on the plans, that fence will be set further back towards the house, the existing house. That's the proposed front elevation, so facing towards the Kings Road. That's what you'll face as you go up the drive. You'll see that's the existing retained part of the garage. That's the rear. So you've got a raised sort of gable on the back here with higher eaves than the other eaves. That is the elevation which will be looking directly towards number 4 Kingslake, and that's the other side on the north. There's your layout. So you've got a kitchen, dining area, and a lounge and study. This is the fence lines, and this is the fence line here. And then you've got Kingslake, number 4 Kingslake here, and then the rear garden for the proposal is coming in down here. And first floor bedrooms and bathrooms within the first floor. There was in the officer report, we have made mention of a previous refused scheme. It was a slightly different site, it's slightly smaller. The site area is slightly increased by moving this line slightly further back that way. But that application sought to actually put a house to the side of this existing property. Obviously now, as I say, we're looking at one coming in that area. So there's the two comparisons, and that was the plan of the previous scheme. So going back to the presentation, the proposed development would provide a new market dwelling, which would in some way contribute to the housing needs of the borough, albeit in a very small way. This is a consideration to be weighed in, against the other considerations of the application, and in particular the visual amenities of the area and the impact on the residential amenities of existing occupiers. In your officer's view, due to the unusual shape of the site and the juxtaposition with the existing properties and existing boundaries of the site, officers are of the view that the proposal will result in an overly cramped and contrived form of development on a restricted site, which if developed would detract from the character and appearance of the area. Furthermore, the proposal would be located very close to existing boundaries, and in the case of number 4 Kingslake would be positioned such that it extends to the full depth of the neighbour's garden and would obscure 45-degree lines taken from habitable windows in the rear elevation of that neighbour. Your officers are therefore of the view that the proposal would have an adverse impact on the residential amenities of existing occupiers and would therefore conflict with local plan policies D1 and D4 and the advice in the residential extension guidelines. These issues, nevertheless, are a matter of judgment for the Planning Committee. Turning to the update sheet, the County Highway Authority have confirmed that they've got no objection to the planning application. However, they would recommend that in the event that planning permission is to be granted, a condition be imposed to secure the submission of a construction transport management plan to be submitted prior to commencement of development. The applicant and a neighbour has also sought to confirm that there is no right of access across the site to serve neighbouring properties, and that this issue should not prejudice the decision of the council. Members will note, however, that officers have already advised that the issue of right of access is a private legal issue. The application is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons 1 to 3 and informatives 1 and 2 as set out on the agenda on page 47. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joe. We have one speaker. I have it here as a Pat Morgan. I don't know whether it's Miss or Mrs. or, but anyway, 4 minutes for you, Mrs. Morgan.
I speak not only on behalf of the residents who will immediately be adversely affected by this application in what is an already very well developed area, but also in concern about their environment in general. I understand that the Parish Council opposes this development, as it has previous, albeit slightly different, proposals. The current plan shows a dwelling that is crammed into a very irregular space. This means that it would be totally out of character with the adjoining Kingslake development, where all the houses are well positioned within sensibly planned plots. Such a building as the one proposed would completely change the character of this cul-de-sac, making the existing properties feel hemmed in. Numbers 1 and 3 would be overlooked to varying degrees, particularly in winter when there are no leaves on the tree. Number 4 Kingslake would always be particularly badly affected. The proposed development would dominate this property, especially its rear garden, and completely alter the character of both the house and its plot. Numbers 3 and 5 Kings Road, with necessarily now reduced rear gardens, would forever be similarly affected. Such infill building would also upset the current amenity value of other properties in Kings Road and the Mount. Many of the above dwellings would, to a greater or lesser degree, lose privacy. In other words, a number of houses could feel more enclosed and overlooked, and so be adversely affected. Of further consideration to local residents, if not to the Highways Department, is the road access to such a development. The very narrow driveway is situated almost on a blind bend, the junction between Kings Road, Mount Road and the Mount. All these are narrow roads and have a great deal of on-street parking, which means that cars and cyclists are, more often than not, forced to approach that blind bend on the wrong side of the road. Local residents are aware of this substantial hazard, but it must only increase with more cars, potentially 3 if the application is successful, all adding to the already existing danger and making an accident even more likely to happen. And that on a route where children which children use to cycle to and from school. I should perhaps say that I live in number 2 Kingslake, and that my house would be least affected by this proposal. But I speak on behalf of those whose living space would be affected and whose privacy would be impaired. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Morgan. We have another speaker, Mr. Sandford.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to point
Sandford,
out...
you may use the...
can you hear me?
I can.
Everybody hear me?
Okay, fire away.
I'll point out straight away, and I hope time isn't taken off for that. The road, or access road, has been there since 1908, when my great-grandfather bought all the land in that area and used it as a carter's yard. I'll now go to number 1, refusal. Proposed by reason of the background position and relationship to other development would present an uncharacteristic and cramped form of development which would harm the character and appearance of the area. Plots 1, 2 and 3 Kingslake are cramped properties. Plots 2 and 3 are only 4 metres apart. They all have very small front gardens and rear gardens, created by the contours of its existing access road, which is not shown from there. Therefore, cramped properties enhanced by external brick walls and architectural external painted timber work. The proposed new house is isolated from the above 3 Kingslake houses, creating distances in excess of planning standards for overlooking. With the Kingslake triangular piece of land designated for landscaping, I don't think it's identified on that, the buffer zone is complete screening of Kingslake's plots 1, 2 and 3 from the proposed new house. The new house will be 6 metres from the corner brickwork of 4 Kingslake, identical to the distance between number 4's garage and number 3 Kingslake. Refusal number 2, the proposed development of regional height, position and depth would result in overbearing form of development. Parish Council refer to mass and bulk. The submission states 1.5 to 2 metres lower than the neighbouring properties. The footprint of Kingslake built areas is as follows. Plot number 1 Kingslake is 29% larger than the proposed development. Plot number 2 is 28%. Plot 3 is 19%, and number 4, which is a slightly larger house, is 49%. I would ask that, the garage at number 4 is a predominant and visual position in Kingslake. It does not reflect Kingslake houses' design being of a gable-to-gable construction with only one round window on site. The proposed new house is only 40% larger than number 4's garage. Number 4 is substantially larger but employs 2 areas of garden, neither area well maintained. The preferred sitting area is adjacent to the lake fence near the garage. The coach house external wall was previously screened by evergreen trees, which have been removed. Because of the position of the coach house structure, the rear garden does not enjoy full sun. The new house would not create a similar situation. Number 4 did not object to the plan. The proposed development... Sorry?
You have 30 seconds.
The proposed development by virtue of just the position of the boundary fencing resulting for standard immediately for occupants of Kingslake. Kingslake residents have certain rights and privileges endorsed by the planners. It appears so. It should be noted that only 2 residents of Kingslake objected. There's no reason by the planners the proposed new property would have top quality fencing or brickwork boundaries to complement Kingslake. This could be a condition of planning permission. Number 3, Kingslake, has a hedge in front of it, which the planners have missed. And number 1, felled 3 fir trees, which provide good screening in the triangular area of the land.
Could I ask you now to wind up, please, Mr. Sanford?
Well, have the planners forgotten about the triangular piece of land which shields
In a
everything?
couple of sentences, if you would.
Pardon?
Just wind up in a couple of sentences, if you would.
The residents of Kingslake complain overgrown and derelict area, good quality landscape and well-maintained mature trees and shrubs would provide screening and solve their complaints. There's been working access on that site since 1908, and the access is perfectly adequate.
I must stop you there then, Mr. Stanford. Thank you. Members, Mr. Byam.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, rather belated. I know the applicant and therefore need to declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, let me apologise for having no jacket on. I come straight from work today, so I thought it was better if I was here. Can I just ask the officers, it's a very good report, how wide is that drive going down there, please?
I'm taking it from sort of the head of close to where inside the site, close to where it opens out, and that's about 3.6 metres.
Thank you.
It's an existing drive.
It's an existing drive,
Yeah.
and it's going to remain at those measurements as it has to, does it?
Yes, I don't think there's any intention. There's fence obviously to number 3 to the right hand side, and then there's an existing fence to number 5. Although the fence at the end is being brought back, I don't think the overall fence width is moved for the access.
Thank you for that. I shall be supporting the officers.
Sorry, I missed what you last said.
Sorry?
I missed your last sentence, Mr.
I shall be. Thank you for that. I think that the drive is too narrow, and I shall be supporting the report.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally support at this stage, certainly, the officer's report, and thank you for that. And also the comments from Cranley Parish Council. I do believe that this is an overdevelopment of the area with the bulk and the mass of the proposed property that would adversely affect the existing residents and occupiers. I've been in Cranley for over 40 years now, so I am aware of this site over a number of years and seen how it has developed during this period of time. And I'm sorry, but I do see this as an attempt to shoehorn into a restricted area yet another property in an area of Cranley that should actually be protected. The access to the property is of concern, whether it's in dispute or not. I do think it's too narrow and potentially dangerous, with very limited, if any, opportunity to pass, which could create problems. And whilst I appreciate that Surrey County Council has not objected, knowing this area as I do, I think that parking in King's Road and the Mount is really atrocious. Cars are parked bumper to bumper almost, and this access is at what I would think, as spoken by the resident, a dangerous place. And it's already difficult, and I think that this would exacerbate the situation. obviously I shall listen to what my colleagues say, but my firm belief at the moment is that I will be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Ellis. Mr Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I think a very relevant matter, which of course the officers included in their report, is the previous application which was refused and the appeal as set out on page 37. And it seems to me that the appeal decision on that occasion is not overcome by the relatively small differences from this application to the one that was submitted in 2008. I go along entirely with what the officers say in their report, and certainly am minded to refuse this for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Joe, you wish to come in?
Sorry, can I just clarify that previous application wasn't actually appealed? So, sorry, just to...
My apologies, but yeah, the reasons for refusals are very pertinent.
Sure. Anybody else wish to speak? No, I'm sorry, Mr Sanford, you're not permitted to speak. You've had your 4 minutes. Indeed, more than 4 minutes. Members, then, if there are no further speakers, let us move then to the recommendation, as stated on page 2 of your update sheet, and that is that permission be refused for reasons 1 to 3 and informatives 1 to 2, as set out in the main report. Can I see those in agreement with the officer's recommendation, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And those against? None.
None.
And no, I assume you're not voting, Mr Bowen. Okay, permission then is refused. Moving on then. We are now on to item B1, WA 2016/0709. The erection of a detached dwelling and garage following demolition of the existing garage and outbuildings at land adjacent to 1 Bookhurst Road, Cranley. Joe.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to the provision of a new detached 2-storey 5-bedroom house with detached double garage located on the to the west of Bookhurst Cottages, immediately to the east of the newly constructed roundabout serving the former Swallow Tars site. The site lies outside the developed area of Cranley in the countryside beyond the Greenbelt. This is the new roundabout, and this is the site here with Bookhurst Cottages running along there. That's a photograph of the existing access. The proposal, this is the road along here with the access coming through. This is the new proposed building, and a garage building, detached garage building here. There are some existing outbuildings in sort of this sort of area. That's the proposed elevations and floor plans and the proposed double garage. The application is essentially identical to that submitted under a previous planning reference WA 2013-2069, which was subsequently dismissed at appeal. However, in dismissing the application, the inspector acknowledged that the recent Swallowhurst development has altered the nature of the countryside in this locality, such that the location of the development is not objectionable in itself and could not be said to be poorly related to services and facilities. The inspector therefore considered that the proposal was in a sustainable and suitable location. He further commented that whilst the proposed dwelling would be sizeable, it would be of a local vernacular design and would not appear visually intrusive or detract from the surroundings. The appeal was dismissed, however, on the basis that the possible effect on biodiversity had not properly been established. This current application has therefore been supported by additional bat emergent surveys which have been considered by the Surrey Wildlife Trust, and we've advised that, subject to enhancements included within the recommendations being carried out, that the proposal would not adversely affect the biodiversity value of the site. Therefore, having regard to the appeal decision, officers are of the view that the proposal, which would contribute in a small way to the housing needs of the borough, would be in a suitable and sustainable location and would not harm the character and appearance of the area. The proposal would not have a detrimental impact on the visual or residential amenities of the area, or adversely impact on highway safety or capacity. Furthermore, subject to compliance with the detailed recommendations of the submitted surveys and reports, there would be no adverse impact on the biodiversity value of the site. Members will note that the recommendation is a subject to recommendation, subject to the receipt and consideration of an arboricultural impact assessment by the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer. This information was actually submitted today, late afternoon today, and so we are, we'll be considering it. Officers do not anticipate that the survey will raise any insurmountable problems, hence the subject to revised recommendation as set out on the update sheet. And if I just read that for you, the revised recommendation is that, subject to the submission and consideration of an arboricultural impact assessment, which obviously, as I say, we now have, and the views of the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer, and subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions, that permission be granted subject to the conditions outlined and set out on pages 68 to 72 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joe. Members? Mrs. Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that previously I might have felt that this property, the proposed property, was too large, and I would have agreed, perhaps with the observation of the parish council, that it was out of keeping with the area in which it was proposed to build it. And I'm thinking particularly of the cottages just fairly adjacent to them. But I do feel, in view of the significant development at Swallowhurst, which is very close to it, that actually that objection that I might have had has been removed, because there are very significant large properties, quite a number of them, on this particular development. And therefore, whilst I do have reservations about the size of this property, the actual site does appear to be large enough to accommodate it, and I think my original thoughts, as I say, have been removed, so that I would support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stennett.
Thank you, Chairman. Someone's just stole my thunder, so I can't really say much more. I think that's absolutely right, and I will be supporting the application.
Thank you very much. Mr. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm right this time. There was an appeal. The appeal, of course, was refused, but certainly when you're looking at the grounds for refusal that the council put forward 1 to 6, and that all of them the inspector found in favour of the applicant, not the council, except for the bat, the biodiversity part, the chances of, if we refuse this, of there being a successful appeal would be very great. In effect, the inspector has said, subject to the biodiversity, this application is acceptable, and we can't totally ignore that. And obviously the local members too recognise what the inspector has said, in that the character of the area has changed in recent years.
Thank you very much. Any other speakers? No. Let's move then to the recommendation. Page 3 of the update sheet. A revised recommendation that's subject to the submission and consideration of an arboricultural impact assessment and views of the Council's Tree and Landscape Officer, and subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions, that permission be granted subject to conditions 1 to 11 and informatives 1 to 8 as set out on pages 68 to 72 of the agenda. Can I see those in support of that recommendation, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 unanimous.
Thank you very much. Permission then is granted. Moving on. Item B2, WA 2016/0754, alterations to the existing ancillary residential buildings, barns A, B and C, to provide 2 independent dwellings with associated works, together with construction of a new garage and alterations to driveway to serve the main dwelling at Willinghurst Farmhouse, Willinghurst Estate, Shamley Green. Flo.
Thank you, Chairman. The site is located in the Greenbelt, in a rural setting to the north of Stroud Common and to the east of Guildford Road. The site, obviously as you can see here, is located just to the north of the Willinghurst Estate Road, and it comprises the Willinghurst Farmhouse, which is a Grade 2 listed building, and 3 timber-framed barns, one of which is also Grade 2 listed, which are currently used ancillary to the main dwelling, which is the Willinghurst Farmhouse. These photos show the front and rear of what would be the first house. Members will note the relative position of Willinghurst Farmhouse as seen sort of bottom left-hand side of the bottom photo. Proposed amendments to these elevations would include the insertion of a number of windows in the rear elevation, both at first floor and ground floor level. These images show barn 2, which would form the main part of the second dwelling, and there would be additional windows inserted in the southern elevation at first floor level, 3 small windows to serve a bathroom. This image shows where the location for the proposed garage for the main Willinghurst Farmhouse would be, located to the right of the wall within the bank. This plan shows the layout of the site. Towards the north of the site, that's where the main Willinghurst Farmhouse is, and the garage would be located just to the south of that, where the mouse is now. Barn 1 is located to the east of the cluster of the 3 barns, and that would form a dwelling in its own, with its curtilage going around it, as I'm showing you now, and private curtilage in that area and to its northeast elevation. And there'll be a parking area set out for 3 cars, gravelled to the southwestern front of the barn. Barn 1 would be accessed using the main central driveway, which would also still remain the access to Willinghurst Farmhouse. Barn 2, in the southeastern corner of the 3 barns, that is also a Grade 2 listed building. That would form the main part of the second dwelling. Barn 2 would be accessed using the access track to the southwest of the site, entering the site between barns 2 and the barn to the north of it, barn 3, which would also provide ancillary accommodation to barn 2. There would be a private amenity space to the north of barn 3, in this area here, and also within the courtyard between the 2 barns, and then the open land to the front would also become part of the second property. These elevations show where the additional windows would be. You can see the number of additional windows proposed within the northeastern elevation of barn 1. Within barn 2, the additional windows in the bottom left-hand image at first floor level, small 3 additional windows. The proposed plans show that consideration has been taken of the fact that they are listed and curtilage listed buildings. The accommodation, especially upstairs, is in pods, so as that most of the original parts of the barns can remain, and also to allow double height areas within the centre of the property. And it's a similar situation for barn 2, with a pod of accommodation at first floor level and large double height area to allow their listed bits to remain. This image shows the proposed garage and how it would be built within the hill slope and how it would appear. In conclusion, the proposal would contribute in a small way to the housing supply within the area. The reuse of the barns as independent residential dwellings would constitute appropriate development in the Greenbelt. The proposed garage would constitute inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. However, officers consider that the requirement for a proportionately sized covered parking area for the main dwelling and its design within the bank would amount to very special circumstances. The proposal would afford a sustainable future for the listed and curtilage listed buildings and would conserve the character and beauty of the AONB and AGLV. The matters of technical opinion are the principle of development, housing land supply, highways access and parking, and the matters of judgment are the impact on the Greenbelt, the AONB and AGLV, the impact on the listed buildings, and the impact on visual and residential amenity, and the assessment of very special circumstances. If I could draw members' attention to the update sheet, this provides additional consultation responses from Wannish Parish Council and the county archaeologists, and neither of these have raised any concerns. The application is therefore recommended for approval, with conditions 1 to 9 and informatives 1 to 9 on pages 100 to 105 of the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Joe. Mr. Band.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as the report says, I think this offers a sustainable way of maintaining some listed barns without any real great impact on the countryside. I think it's a sensible proposal. They already have ancillary domestic use permission, so I think this is only one stage further and is a good way of preserving these barns for the long-term future. And I've personally got no real problem in creating this underground, buried into the bank, additional parking for Willinghurst Farmhouse. So I wholeheartedly support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Band. Mrs. Henry.
Thank you. Well, I think that the first speaker probably stole some of my ammunition, but thank you very much for that. The officer report is absolutely superb. Thank you very much. Am I missing something, or yes, Val is probably missing something. Do we need listed building consent for these alterations?
There is also a listed building consent application that, obviously, if permission is granted, that would also be determined, but it doesn't need to become before members.
Thank you. May I go on, Chairman? Yeah, I think this is it's a good application. It's good looking. These are sound historical buildings, and it's wonderful that they can be changed in such an acceptable way to provide two modest dwellings for the locality. And since they already have ancillary residential use, it's easy I think, to make that transition. And there's adequate parking, there's good green space, and together with the innovative solution to the parking for the farmhouse, I think this is really exemplary. So all in all, a good package, and this is worthy of flying, and I'm very happy to support this enabling application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. More speakers? Well, I do think it is an excellent report and an excellent reuse of the barns, which already have that ancillary use anyway. So, members, I just draw your attention to the recommendation on page 3 of the update sheet, same as it is in the report, and that is that subject to conditions 1 to 9 and informatives 1 to 9 as set out on pages 100 to 105 of the original report, permission be granted. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. I think that just about winds it all up then, members. Mrs. Ellis and I will not be on the site visit, nor will be at the next meeting of Eastern Planning, but as Mr. Else, our Vice Chairman, is on holiday at the moment, it will be his task to deal with the business. Anyway, I wish you a very safe journey home. Thank you very much, and good night.